It's circling and it's about to, okay, we're live.
Good afternoon, everybody. On this gorgeous afternoon of the 6th of April, I'll call the admin committee meeting to order. Jenny, would you please call roll?
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Ms. Saludo?
Here.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Here. We have a couple items. The first, some approval of minutes. I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the December 4th, 2020 admin committee meeting and the February 9th, 2021 admin committee meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jenny, would you please call roll?
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Ms. Saludo?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes. Great. We have two items on the agenda today, and we're actually going to switch the order of them. So we will begin this afternoon with a DEI update. Homer, over to you.
Okay. Good evening, members of the administrative committee. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so you should be able to see the slide set now. So the purpose of my briefing is to provide you an update on the progress of our work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you know, the city manager is working very closely with the community task force. And as part of that work, he asked me to provide the community task force with an update as well. And the first few slides cover what I shared with them. First, I started with some background regarding Dublin's history pertaining to matters related to equal opportunity, discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I brought them up to date on current activities also related to the same. What you see before you is a timeline of various actions and policies that have been enacted since Dublin first officially became a city in 1987. Resolutions and ordinances are issued by City Council. Administrative orders are policies issued under the authority of the city manager that can have effect on both city staff and residents and businesses of Dublin, depending on the circumstances. As I walk through the timeline, I asked them to please keep in mind that when the city was first formed, it consisted of a staff of less than 50 people, and it's grown over the last 33 plus years to about 400 permanent employees, with upwards of 500 seasonal or temporary employees. The population of Dublin, Ohio, has also grown from less than 17,000 to over 49,000. Why is this important? It's important because unlike some larger, more well-established cities like Columbus, Dublin has only recently emerged from its infancy over the last 3 decades and has had a shifting demographic during that same period. We were once fairly homogeneous, but not so much anymore. As Dublin has matured, it has become more introspective in many ways to include diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I then walked them through the timeline. So on this slide, you can see that Dublin started producing policy shortly after becoming a city, and that policy has been reviewed and updated periodically. 2015 is a year that we saw some particular focus activity in this effort with resolutions 8615, AO 2.66, and the city beginning to be assessed by the Human Rights Campaign. And we'll talk about the Human Rights Campaign a little bit more later in my presentation. Our focus continued in 2016 with the implementation of AO 2.73, which addresses our transgender use of restroom, locker room, and shower facilities. And then we also enacted AO 2.74, which addresses our support of nursing mothers with our lactation policies. That's focused on our employees. So finally, in 2016, the city extended health benefits and paid leave provisions in recognition of same-sex marriages. Prior to this, we recognized that domestic partners, but the Supreme Court ruling of 2016 cleared the way for same-sex marriages to be recognized across the nation. In 2017, Council passed Resolution 3717, combating intolerance, negative stereotyping, and discrimination. We also added health benefits to provide services for gender dysphoria and gender transformation procedures to our benefits package. We also began participating in the Martin Luther King Sunday Suppers as a result of an initiative by 3 of our Dublin teams. In 2018, the police department began conducting research into improving diversity in recruiting and hiring in the department. While there has not been a real change in the diverse composition of the department, it has led to improved outreach, educational opportunities for test preparation, and the formation of a diversity and inclusion unit within the police force. At the end of 2019, the city manager began taking us down the initial path of starting to formulate a diversity and inclusion strategic plan. So as you can see on here, we had initially engaged Janetta Darno in helping us develop that, and she brought in Steve Francis to assist her with that. And her company was the Strategic Human Resources. And like I said, Steve Francis was helping her out with that. During that initial phase, we came up with a couple internal definitions, one for diversity, one for inclusion. The diversity statement was, we are a team of different and unique qualities which enable us to best serve our community. And then the city's inclusion statement was, we welcome and expect diversity, and we provide opportunities for all team members to contribute to the city's success. Now, as we've embarked on this journey, the word equity has been added to the mix, and we are currently in the process of formulating an equity statement as well, adding with this. So as we continued into 2020, well, in early 2020, COVID came around, and then the George Floyd tragedy occurred, and it caused a little bit of a delay in the actions that we were taking on. But City Council's resolutions 3720 and 4120 refocused us and required three things of us. First, the formation of a community task force. Second, the formation of a Chiefs Advisory Committee. And finally, the review of the city's internal policies, practices, and training pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a report was provided to council on that earlier this year, or in 2020. Before these resolutions were adopted, however, the administrative committee, this very body, gave its support to the assignment of two LGBTQ plus liaisons that were a liaison between the community and the office of the city manager, and the other one was with the office of the chief of police. And then also during 2020, all city staff was required to take a 1-hour e-learning session on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that gets us, to more current times. So Janetta Darno, as I referred to earlier, she actually took employment elsewhere and has moved on. And so Steve Francis, with his company, Franchise D&I Solutions, has been engaged with helping us start to formulate an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan. And as part of that, we did an appraisal with him. He's got a tool that was used for that helped us look at several areas. They're kind of in the middle of the screen there. We looked at human resources, purchasing and contracting, community relations, and philanthropy, and then the final category in the tool was strategy planning and implementation and accountability. Next thing that he did with us was he actually conducted a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. And then we also have a drafted mission and vision statement that is, we're rolling into that. And we're probably going to be covering that with you sometime later, but not necessarily today, as we formulate some more goals, or our goals are based upon the analysis that we will present to you. So also again, I got a note there in 2020, the employee training was conducted in Cornerstone, which was a platform that council approved for us to implement last year. So we made great use of that in that regard. And then all of the department and division directors received training from Steve Francis, and it was about diversity, equity, inclusion, and bias. And he used a book called a Peacock in the Land of Penguins, for that. And I don't know if you're familiar with that book or not, or have ever seen or read it, but it's really a tool that's used. A peacock is coming into this land of penguins, and all the penguins are very uniform. They're all just alike. And here's a peacock coming in, and it's a very different individual who tries to fit in. But it was a great exercise to go through with all the various lessons to be learned as we walk through that that course of instruction. Took a couple iterations to get through that, but I think it helped the staff out a lot, and kind of looking in at ourselves. And then Steve Francis is also going to be doing here in 2021, more diversity and equity and inclusion training with a focus on implicit bias as well with all of the city staff. And I'll talk about that again on the last slide when we get to it. So this next slide, this is just a very brief summary of the SWOT analysis that we did. Just put the major headings of everything that we came up with. And there was a select group of city staff that participated in this. And it's from this analysis as well as the appraisal that Steve Francis led us through and the internal assessment that we did last year that we're going to be developing our specific goals from, that we'll be coming back to you with at a later date. And that work is ongoing. So just briefly hitting the SWOT analysis here, you can see under strengths, we very much appreciate the support that we're getting from our elected officials, and the senior management here within the city is all very supportive of it. We've been doing DEI training for some time now, so we think that our city staff has received a lot of that. However, this year the training we're going through is going to be a little more dynamic. It's going to have a different focus to it. So I think it's going to be more engaging with them. I've already sat through a session of it, and it is much more engaging with the audience that's being addressed. Our different job types really lend to diversity as well. We've got a wide array of jobs that people can step into. We have a great relationship with our business and corporate community. The spirit of innovation here is great, and our resident engagement is awesome as well. So we see those as our strengths, our weaknesses. I'm not going to sit here and read all these to you, but we think we need to do a better job of telling our story, outwardly in terms of our diversity and how we embrace it. The housing stock, you've been having some discussions on housing. That's something that we see in terms of our Dublin workforce, because we know that only about 11% of our workforce actually lives in Dublin. And we think that that's a weakness, and we'd like to see what we can do about being able to have employees live in Dublin, that actually work for Dublin, see what we can do about that. So I'll let you read through that. In terms of opportunities that are coming our way, again, there's a great diversity of businesses and suppliers out there, and we think we need to engage them more and maybe be a little more direct in tracking our contracting and the vendors that we have to make sure that they are members of a diverse community as well. So I'll just look at those, the threats that we have coming our way. None of these are really, we don't think they're looming threats, but they're things to be concerned about. And the biggest thing is, we need to make sure that we have ongoing support, from leadership and everything going forward, into the future. So that's the SWOT analysis. The other thing that when I did the briefing with the community task force, Steve Francis did join me with that. And during that time, he actually reviewed a glossary of terms. He picked about 10 different terms out of a menu that came from the Pacific University of Oregon. We felt that it was very important to be able to have something that we could refer to have a common understanding of what the terms are. You should be seeing a screen pop up right now. And this is that actual link opened up, and you can see as I scroll through it, there are probably about 200 definitions in here. So it's a very comprehensive list. So we thought it would be something, a great tool for the community task force and for us internally as staff to refer to have common ground when it comes to using common terminology. So you can certainly peruse through that with that link at your leisure. I'm not going to sit and go through all those different terms with you, even though I thought about it, very briefly. So we did cover that with them. And then this next slide talks about the Human Rights Campaign. So as you are aware, the Human Rights Campaign conducts an annual review of its municipal equality index. The cities they assess receive a draft in June to be responded to by the end of July. And then the index is published in October. The left side of this slide depicts those items and actions that the Human Rights Campaign gives us credit for currently. The right side of the slide are those areas the Human Rights Campaign suggests that we consider for improvement. The green areas would take some level of action by City Council. The blue areas will be addressed by the City Manager or some staff action. If council has a desire to pursue any of these, we can certainly provide more detail on what the parameters would be and consider enacting any or all of them. The thing I'll tell you, the one highlighted in blue under enacting local non-discrimination laws, make city-owned single occupancy facilities all gender. We actually did that last year, but they had an issue with it because we make a special provision for the rec center because of the number of families going there. So they felt that our policy should also include the rec center. So we'll make some slight tweaks to that, but I think we can meet their criteria. And then the other one is, we did have a hate crime that occurred in the city, and they actually give you credit for reporting to the FBI the year after, it actually, so 2 years after it actually occurred. So they look back 2 years to see if you had hate crimes or not with it. And then they give you credit for making that report at that point in time. Otherwise, they don't give you any credit for any of the rest of that. So there's the list of things that you can consider for improvement. Again, if you have an appetite to consider enacting any of these, just let us know and we'll get you the additional information. And we'll engage that. So this is my last slide. So I do know that there has been some recent discussion about council boards and commissions undergoing DEI and/or ethics training. This is the training you see before you is the training staff will engage in this year, and we can accommodate members of council as well as members of the various boards, commissions into this training as well. The first one you see up there would require some coordination as it is conducted in a live fashion with Steve Francis. The other two are e-learning and can be conducted at the learner's convenience. So again, if council wants to pursue these, just let me know and I'll get Robin Myers engaged with assigning the training and getting the class coordinated. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm open to any questions or comments that you may have.
Questions for?
I just have the comment that I think it's great that you went through the whole process. I think we all feel as if we're meeting all of the criteria necessary to be sure that we're inclusive, but I don't think until you actually walk the walk and realize what the strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities and threats are, you really do know down to into the micro parts of the city where you can improve. And I think that was the most valuable slide to me, the one that showed where you really examined yourself. And I think it's always a good idea to have the e-learning available to boards and commissions. They're in the public face. They meet the public all the time. I think it's very beneficial. So I would like to see that utilized for our boards and commissions as well as council. Sure.
I think part of the question is Jane, do you feel that we should be requiring, I don't know about the in-person class, that feels like a little bit of a big ask, especially for our volunteer boards and commission members, but as part of, maybe it's an annual or an every other year self-paced training, I don't think doing the e-learning module would be too much to ask in terms of, cultural intelligence and things of that nature. I think that's something that, every board and commission member and council member, frankly, should do probably every 2 years. I'd like to see it done every year, actually, but I also know that the amount of ask we put on these folks is pretty great. So I don't want to stress that any more than we have to.
Christina, one of the things I discussed with Dana is, I know Steve Francis has done a lot of work with us. Would it not be worthwhile to have a conversation with him or someone else? But I use him because we've done so much work with him. And see, to your point, if we couldn't tailor something for the boards and the commissions, that knowing specifically what we're trying to do for council and tailor something, and Dana was supportive of that. And I do believe we have some budget dollars in the council and boards and commissions where we could make something that is, you know, maybe a little more interactive, but not demanding. And if that's something you guys think might be useful, we could begin that work. Now that I think we've walked down the path enough, you know, Dana was saying, you know, let us do a few things to learn a little bit, right? Now I think maybe we might be at that point where we could say, could you help us put together something? Is that
Yeah,
like
I think so. I think the sensitivity that I'm having is really more towards the time commitment asked, particularly I think of you know, planning and zoning and ARB, and even CSAC, depending on what's in front of CSAC, because sometimes they spend a lot of hours, you know, doing research and follow up. And I mean, it's a big commitment. And so I think this is really, really important. I think we need to do something. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's a shorter, you know, 45-minute interactive kind of thing with somebody versus the e-learning, whatever that is. And maybe we just need to ask our board and commission members what would make sense for them too. I don't know, but I definitely think we need to do something.
I was gonna say, you know, having went through the course of instruction with him already, there are several videos in there that he could probably cut out or just provide the link to that people could just go look at on their own. That would shorten that down quite a bit. And you know, there's a couple of areas he could probably pare down as well. So I can get with him and talk to him about, you know, can we get to 45 minutes to an hour and then come back to you with that recommendation.
That would be great, Homer, because I do think that having something in person is generally speaking for training purposes always better than doing, you know, the thing online. Online stuff is great for like reminders and, you know, stuff you've already been through. In person just is so much of a richer experience. So yeah, I would really appreciate that. Thank you, Homer.
Okay.
I see Christine's face here. She's on. Christine, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say, as the voice of working with volunteers for so many years, even in leadership positions, they commit to a lot of time. And I wouldn't be fearful of asking them to devote time to training. I think they want it. And I think, you know, from my interactions with your boards and commissions, they would absolutely welcome more tools in their toolbox.
I agree with Christine. I think it's true. There's they want to increase that level of professionalism because they find themselves sometimes not connected to what the current thinking is or what's going on in the city. And diversity is a big deal when it comes to meeting the public and the applicants. And I think they would like to learn what they don't maybe know. And so I think it live is fine. I agree with you, Christine. I think that's richer. But I also know those meetings are long that they have, and sometimes you may not have the energy to have that training. And so even having the module and just making a little checkbox that you took it is better than not having anything at all. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think Homer's idea is great, is if he can get together and get the in-person stuff maybe pared down a little bit. And then I think it's a totally reasonable ask. Absolutely.
Great. Would you take that as a to-do, Homer?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. I had a couple of sort of follow-up questions, if I could. And I think I see Chief. Yeah, I see Chief here. I was wondering how the liaison work is going to date, and maybe a little update on your advisory group.
Thank you for asking. The liaison that we added, the LGBTQ liaison, our officer Amber McCloskey recently took over that role last year. And we've added an additional community liaison officer in Officer Rigoberto Quintanilla as well. And so Scott Nicholson, Officer Quintanilla and Officer McCloskey all fulfill those roles of community liaison officer. Unfortunately, over the last year, we haven't had as much opportunity with COVID to be able to meet in person, but they've done an exceptional job of reaching out by phone or by email, and on the occasions where we can, then being in person with groups who are eager and desire to be in close connectivity to officers in what I always refer to as planned occurrences. So most occasions where somebody calls an officer, it's in an unplanned occurrence. Either they've had something that occurred and they need an officer to respond and take a report or help them with the situation. And so those planned engagements where we can go and have a conversation with community members are certainly what we're hopeful for all of our officers, but in particular for our community liaison officers with those community members who are not as comfortable maybe with the police department or police officers. They've done a fantastic job of reaching out and engaging. And most recently, the vigil that the Kaufman students held at Bridge Park a couple of weekends ago, officers, including Corporal Morris, were there to be there in support and engagement with our residents and community members in the community. So from that front, I think they've done an excellent job, and I'm very eager to, again, open things back up when we can do so safely and be able to have those officers, among others from our organization, reach out and engage on a regular basis. As an update on the Chiefs Advisory Committee, we've had, I believe we're right at 7 meetings so far with the group, and we've had some really fantastic discussion with that group as well. Again, an eager group of volunteers. I'm so very appreciative to have engaged with us and regularly meeting. So we started the first few meetings really focused on a topic that they brought to the table as part of the impetus for them joining the Chiefs Advisory Committee, and we had a lot of discussion about the School Resource Officer Program. So we very carefully walked through a presentation of all of the documentation that associates with our partnership with Dublin City Schools, including the agreement over the school resource officers, our policies regarding our school resource officer and community education unit. And then we also had an entire meeting or 2 meetings devoted to question and answer with current school resource officers, so that the members of the advisory committee got an opportunity to start from an informed perspective as it related to the information, but then just have engagement and dialogue with school resource officers. So we are still waiting on them, the members of the advisory committee finalizing their recommendations, but the hope is in the near future they'll have recommendations for us that we can share with council, that we can share with the public, and things that we can talk about in partnership with the school as well to talk about where we progress. Very supportive of the program, but want to see maybe some additional training that they can help us identify for our school resource officers and some other recommendations. As we have progressed in those meetings, we have also identified policies that the members of the advisory committee want to sit down and again have equal, thoughtful discussion as we work through our continued partnership with the group. And those policies included our policy on response to resistance or use of force, rendering aid in the aftermath of an engagement or encounter with that involves a response to resistance, our body camera policy, our officer involved critical incident policy, and then our crowd control or response to civil disturbances policy. So far we started with what we felt like was the best foundation for these other discussions, which included a 2-meeting discussion on our response to resistance policy. So they have an understanding of when our officers are engaged in an event where they're trying to control someone, they understand what the direction, training, and expectations are for our department and for our members, so that we can, again, have conversation about the information, talk individually with some of our officers and some of our trainers on staff, and then move into an area of them making suggestions or recommendations to make sure we're meeting community expectations as we move forward. And we're also providing as much information and awareness as we possibly can on what we do, why we do it, and then importantly, who we are as public servants in the community here in Dublin as well. So that's just a very quick update on how we've progressed. My hope is to provide a memo to council this month to give an update to all council members on how we've progressed with that particular group and conversations. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a lot in a short period of time.
It's been fantastic discussion. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
I appreciate the update. Other questions or comments or areas to discuss with Homer on this? I only had one other question, or Homer, you had mentioned back on the list of the Human Rights Campaign report. I remember, I think it was last year, we received, and forgive me if this was sent and I haven't seen it, sort of an overview of how the region is doing in some other communities. Do we have that full report?
Yeah, I can certainly get a hold of that and provide it to you. There's basically 8 cities across the entire state of Ohio that are looked at. The 6 largest cities, us, and the other city is slipping my mind the name of it. That's a similar sized city to us.
Okay.
Most all those large cities, they're much more, heavily resourced. They're all, I'm really trying to avoid talking about points. They get a lot of credit for everything that's on here, because they have the resources to do it. Because a lot of this takes some empowerment, to enforcement capability, things like that. There are some other communities around the area like Worthington and Westerville that have enacted some things of that nature. They are not tracked on the HRC and the IDO. So I don't know where they would stand in terms of their overall assessment, but things like the non-discrimination laws for employment, housing, and public accommodations, those 3 areas specifically, they have an enforcement, a law about it, and they also have an enforcement capability. One of them has partnered with the city of Columbus. The other one has the law director that is really kind of in charge of that. But when you look at the enforcement capability that they have, it's a very minor fine for any infraction that they would have. So really, what we've done in that regard is we've relied on the state of Ohio and federal law and those court systems in terms of our non-discrimination enforcement within the city of Dublin. Our courts just aren't really set up to hear those kind of cases.
Sure. So maybe you could just make the most current report available to council. That would be good, because I don't know that I've seen the most recent one that's more.
Yeah, I can get the link and send it to you. That's probably the best thing, because they've got a pretty comprehensive report they put out every year that you can go through and find us and look and see how we are across the entire nation.
Great.
But I'll get that link and get it to you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Anything else before we move on? Nope. Okay, great. So our second item on the agenda tonight is we are going to be the first group, because we're the most special group, I guess. We're the first group that's going to embark on the next step of the Dublin 2035 framework plan. And I see Jenny is lit up here and ready to go. So I think she's going to help us through that today. So we have, I think, sort of 2 objectives. One is to do the exercises, and then maybe we'll spend just a couple minutes at the end debriefing and see if there's things we might want to suggest to the next group as well as we go through this process. So great. Over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good. Perfect intro. Yeah, so I just put some slides together that match the materials that you have, but just to help keep us organized tonight. So thank you again and welcome everybody. So our discussion tonight, as you mentioned, you're our guinea pigs for our first go around here. You're our first committee for this next step in our discussion about 2035 and the framework surrounding that. So our goals for tonight are to talk through, to sort of remind everyone what we're doing, where we are in the process, and where we're going. Talk through then specifically what's going to happen tonight and your work surrounding that, and then be led through a facilitated discussion based on the materials that we provided you. And then again, we can talk next steps about what's going to happen next. And then, yes, we'd love your feedback for the future committees to see if there's anything else we could make more clear for everyone as we move forward. So really quickly, so our 2035, we've had a couple opportunities to be before all of council, and really had the chance then following those discussions to look at how do we really get at this framework and what does that mean. So we've had some internal discussions and then some discussions with Vice Mayor DeRosa to really look at how to streamline this and make this as a robust conversation as we can, but really trying to stick to that theme of the big ideas. So we had a one-pager in your packet that talked about, what is 2035, why are we doing it, and how does it relate to other things? So I thought I might quickly go through what those are. So the what obviously is developing that unique and unified framework that's going to be a collection of all 4 committees' work and ultimately reviewed and accepted by council that really is that visionary set of big ideas of where are we going, looking forward into 2035, what are those big transformative things that we want to work toward. And again, Dublin, why are we doing this? Dublin has obviously always been a forward-thinking community, and how do we keep pushing that? And that became very clear in your goal setting last year in 2020 that we really wanted to look at this and take it to the next level. So how do we stretch our thinking? How do we use this information to guide how we make city investments in our policy decision making and all of our community interactions? So how do we put all those pieces together? And this coming up with this framework really helped to solidify how we're going to do that. And then ultimately, how are we going to use this? So we're going to use this in updating the community plan, in our CIP planning, all those sort of overarching policies and guides that we use staff on an everyday basis, council uses in their decision making, as well as boards and commissions. So we're going to use this framework to help us guide that and direct updates to all of these documents as well. Obviously, we know we need to update the community plan, and this will help inform us how to do that. And this is, again, a great opportunity to address some of these community challenges that Homer was just sharing with us and we were discussing. This could help us definitely help pave the way for how we're going to address those moving forward. So in terms of where we are and where we're going, obviously we've had several committee or council work sessions. The most recent one in February, we had some really good discussion amongst council members, and you did a little pre-work for us, and then we were able to talk through that and tease that out. And following that, we really wanted to break down this next work in your committees into sort of 3 big milestones. So today you're in milestone 1. So every committee here in April is going to be going through this initial big idea process and really wanting to understand, what our focus of this is: community challenges, initially identifying these big ideas for the future, and then helping us to understand what information, what research, how, if there's any experts we want to engage as we move forward into milestones 2 and 3, that this will help us sort of begin that conversation of what that looks like. So following the work for this milestone 1 for today will help us bring some clarity to those ideas and really want to pinpoint that, again, this is the initial conversation of this. We have some ideas from before, which were in your packet, and I'm going to share just to keep your brain thinking and looking at what we've talked about before, but we'll have opportunities in milestones 2 and 3 to have additional committee conversations with all of council. We intend to have public engagement as part of this, as well as then I mentioned some expert engagement. So wanting the committees to help us define what information, what kind of people, topics, interests you have that we can help provide, can staff provide to you to help inform this. So tonight's goal is really to think of the idea, not how we're going to do it or whether it's going to work, just what are those big ideas that you have burning that we really want to see the city move forward with. So milestones 2 and 3 will obviously follow after today, and then ultimately, once we come to the end of this and develop our framework, then we will have, obviously council will formally accept that, and then as I mentioned under the how we're going to use this part, we're going to use this, as we move forward and implement our various policies and projects moving forward. So in terms of tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to have a facilitated discussion that's going to be led by Planning Next. So Jamie Green and Logan Stang are here again to help us have this conversation. Obviously, the committee members part of that. And then as you notice, we have a lot of division directors here to take part in the conversation, help answer any questions and provide their ideas if they have any that they want to share, and also looking at what those resources might be. So as I finish talking here, our discussion questions tonight here on the bottom. So what are the big ideas for your theme, which is quality of life? And then what does the committee need to know to justify these ideas as we move forward? So what other information resources do you need? So as you're keeping those questions in mind, just to remind you, obviously each theme, so again, admin committee is quality of life, and we have then infrastructure, land use, and financial. That is, each of those are assigned to a different committee, but under each of the themes are these various elements that come from either the community plan evaluation that we've done and additional conversations with council. So under that, again, to keep your brain focused on what quality of life at this point, and as we've identified, falls within that. So safety, leisure, culture, design, engagement, city services, land and facilities, and resiliency and sustainability. And as we go through this, we can definitely talk through what those mean to all of you and how your big ideas may coincide with those. And we may ultimately come up with big ideas that cover one for each of those, one that covers 4 of those. There may be some that we identify that maybe these are not relevant at this time and they're really only applicable in the community plan and not necessarily as part of this discussion. So I think as part of that facilitated discussion, this will sort of get teased out a little further. But to help sort of demonstrate what I mean by that is we included in your packet sort of this big idea starter. So put together some of the discussion and ideas that have come out so far as part of council's discussion and council work, and then trying to pinpoint what those might tie to in terms of the elements within your theme, as well as within the 3 other themes that council committees will be talking about. So under quality of life, I highlighted that at the top in the blue box. So again, and we don't have to be married to any of these. This is really just to get your brain flowing. And so, we've been, paying attention and trying to figure out how to incorporate the discussion and what that means to these big ideas. So potential big idea, increase the miles of bicycle trails by 50%, establish a civic center for the community, become an energy independent city, develop a regional sports and athletic campus, become a 15-minute city, meaning that you would have less than 15 minutes to travel to all of your services. So again, those are just to get your brain flowing and thinking about those big ideas. So again, not looking at how we're going to do it, but if we had a big idea, what is that? And then our next milestones and steps will help us figure out and tease that out as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions about what I've talked about, and then I will turn it over to Jamie and Logan. Okay, so I've thoroughly answered all your questions. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to, again, Jamie and Logan. And again, other division directors are here as well as needed. Thank you very much.
And those other division directors, please correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy and Jenny, they are more than welcome to help throw out some of those big, very audacious goals as well.
Could I say that they're required? We would love to hear their input, please. Please. You're muted, Jamie.
Yeah, I don't know how many years of COVID it's going to take for me to get out of that habit, but we're really grateful to be here this evening and try to help. As Jenny said, we had some good, since the last time we were together, had some good conversations with the Vice Mayor and Jane, and I think hopefully tried to simplify this. I just want to emphasize a couple of things that Jenny said about process. One of them is milestones don't necessarily equal meetings. So just because you see 3 of those things doesn't mean it's 3 events. It may take some of the committees, 1 meeting, it may take others 3 to kind of get to the next milestone. So one of the conversations at the end of this is, what does this group think they need to do in order to get to the next milestone that's in that. And I'd also like to say that I really appreciate the Vice Mayor's notion that we do want to have a little bit of reflection at the end here on how this goes. So if you could, kind of have two lines of thinking here about the work of the committee, but also how this is helpful or some things aren't helpful, we'd like to know. And that includes the written documentation. We tried to explain a number of things like this workbook that you can actually take notes in it and even ahead of the meeting, organize your thoughts. So think about not just what we're talking about tonight, but how, we tried to get you organized for getting in here. So it sounded like you understood Jenny's overview and you're ready to go to work here. We would really like for you to think about the starter ideas or any other ideas you may have had, or anything that comes to mind tonight. There's nothing, that's out of bounds for our thinking. It's not a feasibility exercise. It's a brainstorming, thinking about the future. I would like you, in sort of your own self-filtering, though, to think about some of the ideas and whether or not that they're better suited to get handled in, the community plan. If that's the kind of idea it is, it's probably not a big transformative idea. Some of your ideas, the big ideas, will have to be integrated with capital improvements planning and other things that the city does in order to help achieve it. But we're really not starting there. We're not starting with the basic, blocking and tackling to run the city. It's really like this stretch goal or stretch ideas that we're really looking at. So the first thing I would like to know, and you can pull an idea from, again, the starter ideas or any place that you like, and maybe just, if you could just share one at a time. And we'll go around to everybody, including the staff, and get some ideas. Logan's going to be typing them up. And then when we feel like we've exhausted the list or we've run out of time, I want you to be able to reflect on those. And we're not really in the business of paring down. We don't have to have a really tight list tonight, but I think if we could somewhere get around 5 to 7 that the committee thought, you know what, we think we could carry these forward. 5 to 7 big ideas times 4 groups is a lot if they're really, really big ideas. So at some point we will have to, think about how to narrow the field. But tonight if we could get around 5 to 7 to carry forward, I think that's our target, but it's not hard and fast. So who would like to offer the first big idea?
Well,
Jane's been thinking
Jane
of,
does. It's Jane, I can tell.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to go first because I won't be able to stop. No, I want to go last.
okay.
Okay, Homer.
Go first.
Homer, go ahead.
I'll go first, and I'll tell you, I think I just got done talking about it. I think the big goal for us is to be a city that is a shining example of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Great. Thanks, Homer. Somebody else?
I'll add one.
Sure.
We've seen a lot about changing ways to educate. We were just talking about what works online or not. I think it'd be wonderful if we could build what I would call a think place. And if that was the what we see now as the beginning of our campus over in the Innovation Center, but where we could have potentially a space where we have 3 universities, maybe one of them from Central Ohio, maybe one of them from Central Africa, I don't know, but really think about lifelong education and build a think place where no matter what your age is, whether you're a high school student or a senior, we're going to bring together brilliant minds so that you, as in your personal fulfillment of education, could have a revolutionary way of thinking about lifelong education. So that's a thought.
That's great. All right. Is it Christine? Yes.
I have one around transportation. I don't really know how to phrase it, but provide opportunities for lots of different types of alternate transportation. So whether it's, fractional vehicle rental, right? So you're renting a vehicle for 5 minutes to get from your workplace to wherever you're going to go have lunch, or smaller mass transit, or more bike pathways, just lots and lots of different ways of transportation so that we could, really get places connected that aren't necessarily connected today.
Great.
I had the same one as Homer did actually, though, too. Great minds.
Right. Right.
So I also had this thing where it's like these quality of life indicators. And in the little bit of research that I was doing, the ones that I found were material living conditions like income, consumption, material conditions, productive or main activity, health, education, leisure and social interactions, economic security and physical safety, governance and basic rights, natural and living environment, and overall experience of life. Like for us to be able to create and then share with the public, and these don't have to be the ones we use, like these were just the ones that I found. What are our indicators? What are the goals we're trying to reach for those indicators? And how do we let people know that we're amazingly awesome because, connectedness, right? Because that's one of our overarching goals is being the most connected city. Like throw that one in there.
Right.
So I have this big vision of this amazing dashboard thing in head that allows us to say, here are the things we really want to talk about, and here are our goals, and here's where we are with these goals. So we can share that out. And now I'll let somebody else go.
Well, I think I get the gist of that, Christine, and I think that, part of your work going forward is, putting some more flesh on what these ideas might actually look like. But, that sounds like a really ambitious idea of wanting to have an incredible quality of life, but doing it in a way that you're really measuring what matters to you and then communicating what matters out to the public. So you're all building on that.
And this speaks a little bit to what Homer was saying earlier. I know that was involved with more with EDI, but really getting good at telling our story. That's
yeah. No, that's great. Christine?
Yeah, we have a Christina. I go by Christine, so you don't call me Christina.
Okay.
So,
I thought I was saying Christine because the words show up here, and I thought I was saying it.
yeah. I just brought up my camera. Just it's easier to see faces and be creative when we can see each other's faces. But I did write quite a few notes. You say civic center, and to me that means an entirely different thing. And I was so thrilled to see that. To me, that's not necessarily about conferences and a large place of gathering people, but a civic center to me is a place where civics and citizens can gather. And even our social service agencies, it has been a long held dream of mine to see a centralized place like a 1919 building to be that center of service. So a service center for our citizens. The other ideas that I had really kind of mimic Kathy's, which are that we have a citizen culture of innovation and a citizen city of wellness and a citizen city of learning. So we have so many citizen academies. We do have so many things at our fingertips. I think there is a little bit of a disconnect between adult and senior citizens and our schools if you don't have kids in our school system. So I would love for us to be a city of learning and a city of wellness and a city of leadership. One of the very first stories I learned when I came to the city 23 years ago was the story of how leadership programs were born, and it was in the city of Atlanta when their council members, and you can nod if you already know this story, all went on a trip on the same plane, and the plane went down. And the objective was, where is our bench strength among our citizens to find leaders to take over? And that's traditionally how leadership programs were born. And so I'm very interested in move management of citizens to become our next generation of leaders, starting at the teen level. So
Great.
That's a passion of mine. Thanks for listening.
Great, Christine. And if you have more than one, we're going to come back around. So don't feel like you have to get them all in here at one point.
I have like 81. Sorry. No,
81?
No, I'm thanks.
All right, well, we'll be here. All right, Jay, do you have a big idea you might want to put out there?
Well, you got an operations guy here, so you get what you get with me. I too really did like the idea of the Civic Center. Where I'm from, we had a Civic Center in our town. I thought it was strange that you really don't see those anymore. and the amount of programming and things that you can get out of the value of such a structure is pretty unique. And I think that's something, in my opinion, worth exploring a bit more. The rest of mine are pretty centered around connectivity, so they kind of are all lumped together, but I'll hold off on those for a bit later.
Okay. Jay, where is home? If is there an example there that we could?
Yeah, and I don't know if I would brag about this. It's Lima, Ohio, so I'm from Lima,
Yeah.
so we have a civic center in Lima. So,
Yeah.
but that's, we used it as I grew up. There was a lot of great shows, a lot of great programming, a lot of great art events. I think it's probably seen better days to this point, as has the town. But yeah, I can remember spending a lot of time through events there.
Yeah, that's great. I've been there. I went to see Jerry Seinfeld there about 3 years ago.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Allison, you're on mute. You've taken a trick out of my bag. Yeah.
Yeah, you caught me off guard. But yeah, I think to me, I keep trying to think of, I'm in events, and so I think of what would bring in some of those larger events and bring that vibrancy. And so for me, there's a bit of that, that I'm hoping that if we bring in some of these other cultures and stuff, that I'd like to help them to build their own events, so to bring back the Japanese festival we used to have, or I've been trying to steal the one from downtown, or I've been trying to steal the Indian festival from downtown. But I think our community looks for those kind of things. So I would like to, for the inclusion piece, to bring some of those events up here into Dublin.
All right. We will not report that you want to steal things for Dublin.
I've already told them. I've told them I'm trying to steal them.
It's common knowledge that we're going to steal. Okay.
Yeah.
Jennifer, what would you like to steal?
I just had a quick look at all the names because there's always more than one Jennifer in the room. So I'm assuming you're referring to me.
Yes, yes.
I kind of want to go back and steal what Homer said. I represent human resources, and we are always trying to think of new and exciting ways to really represent diversity, inclusion, culture here in the city in terms of hiring people and attracting the people who live in the community to come and want to work for the community. And that's been a constant struggle that we'd love to enhance.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. So I have, was that somebody speaking? I'm sorry.
No,
I
I
have somebody.
was just going to add one thing on to what Jennifer was just saying, and it's one thing I did not put in my briefing. We have an Asian population in the city that's about 23% or so, and we only have a couple of people of that ethnicity that actually work on city staff. So that's one of the things that I think we really need to work on. That Jennifer just said.
Thanks, Homer. So I have somebody here with an EARMMC.
That would be Matt.
Matt? Okay, yeah. I knew that's how it was spelled, but yeah. So
Yeah,
you
I
have
changed my name
Yeah.
profile for sure.
Yeah.
It keeps
Matt?
me a little under the radar a lot.
Sure. Matt, do you have thoughts on a big idea?
Yeah, I think just witnessing over the years demographic shifts and population increases and just a difference of philosophy. I think this goes back to some of my comments that I made to City Council last week or 2 weeks ago about the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and our need to revisit some of our service levels, particularly in the field of youth sports. Youth sport has become a phenomenon beyond belief. It's been it's been a very big success story for the city. It's produced a lot of quality individuals because of the quality of sports. But we are at a capacity, and we're asked for more and more field space every year for different reasons. And we try to accommodate the four groups, but we've got to revisit who is it that we're trying to accommodate and how. There are a series of models that I don't think we've ever pursued in the way of public-private or public-public partnerships or public-private partnerships on a regional basis to accommodate this type of growth and spread out what we can offer to a variety of different municipalities that already play together in the sport. Each of us come together as, you know, an entity that can contribute to such a sports complex that can accommodate so much more than each municipality can separately, and create a business model for it's self-sustaining, so it's not so draining on taxpayers' dollars. You could expand the level of play, you could expand the number of tournaments and create an economic impact, and give people just a whole lot better opportunity to participate at whatever level that they wanted to. So expanding on that regional partnership idea to create a recreation district or even an individual complex of some kind.
But hosted in Dublin, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm sorry?
Hosted in Dublin? Hosted in
Not
Dublin?
necessarily. I think we've got a lot of unmarked land to our west that, you know, we could probably partner with a lot of different municipalities, and you know, you could acquire land a whole lot cheaper out in the farmlands that are going to end up being developed anyway than, you know, than using up already developable properties here.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification, but I understand this. There's this really, as the kids would say, massive notion about how to work with your regional partners on sports facilities that, you know, really is significant there.
Well, the crux of this is that, you know, we've got to really hurry up on this, because we have a philosophy here that we concentrate on core recreational programming, which means the higher levels of competition get secondary and tertiary priorities. Well, if the capacities are decreasing and individuals are asking for more field space, we're going to have to end up telling people you cannot play in Dublin anymore, and that's not going to be favorable for anybody to have to deal with. So,
you
know, these are tough decisions that are going to come down, you know, in the next few years. So we've got to really start working on that.
Great, thank you, Maria.
Hello. Oh, I'm kind of leaning back towards the civic center conversation, but my mind was thinking more of a cultural, a cultural place where we can not only share in our own cultural things that we bring from our own cultures, but to share them, and for our community to be able to share them with each other, not necessarily in a big event, which I appreciate, Allison, because you put on beautiful events and those are fabulous, but I'm thinking even like smaller scale more often, and just so that we can learn about each other's cultures and learn to embrace them, but just by being more engaged with them. So I don't know if that would be in the same civic center, but overall is what I'm thinking.
Great. Thanks, Maria. So, Chief.
Yeah, certainly for me, the safest community, you know, and recognized as the safest is always the top priority. But pairing back to some of the discussion from others, you know, one of the things that we've talked about and we continue to talk about with the advisory committee is the idea of procedural justice, and not just in policing, but when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not just the tenets of those concepts, but also the application and fairness in processes. And that involves both policing practice, but it involves a number and host of other considerations in housing and education and healthcare that all need to be reflective of, again, procedurally just practices within a community, and what that furthers in inclusivity, but also in the idea of safety and security within a community, and making Dublin home for anyone who wants to be here and be part of our community.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Tracy?
Hi, I would like to continue to reimagine how we are bringing leisure to the public. We've learned a lot of really good lessons during this pandemic, and preparing to pivot the way we provide leisure services. And those could be in the area of virtual programming, they could be in the area of esports, or changing demographics of the senior population, just continuing to reimagine the way we provide these services and get away from thinking about it as a come to us kind of mentality, and be a little more creative about that. I think that we're learning some things about how quickly people are prepared to return to us, and that, you know, virtual programming is not gonna go away. So kind of reimagining that for us.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. I have someone here with a Dublin CPI name on there. The sound is not coming through.
You're muted.
It looks like the mute came off, but we couldn't hear you.
It looks like she froze.
Yeah, she's got that little yellow caution sign there.
Her name's Lindsay, Jamie.
Lindsay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Here she is.
There. Lindsay, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Lindsay Weisenauer. Dublin CPI stands for Communications and Public Information. And my big visionary goal is to one day have my own WebEx account. Just kidding. We share an account and that's fine. And it works some of the time, obviously. So a lot of my big ideas do center around council's goal to be the most connected city. And I really gravitate toward that because I think that that can only bolster our reputation globally to be a global city of choice, and also just improve the quality of life. And honestly, that is some of the things that we hear most often from residents. Fiber to the home. I know everybody wants it. We have this great Dublink network, and I know that the residents would love to have that. I have the council work session in my mind pretty fresh from a few weeks ago where we were talking about being able to do that one day. And so I have to put that out there as a big visionary goal, and just basically leveraging technology to improve lives and make things easier, make things more accessible for everyone, regardless of age or educational level, things like that. You know, we have these Alexa pilots. I could see really being able to use that in a very responsive nature sometime, where you could say, you know, Alexa, is my trash being picked up today, or is it going to be delayed? Just things like that, that we're just this close to being able to get there, I think. And so those ideas, and then just with mobility, we're really on the cusp of making some really neat things happening with mobility options, so that we're not just such a vehicle-centered society, being able to use various modes of transportation, from bicycles to bike share to connected technology. Things like that are, I think, some really good ideas too.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
So I believe we have all the, what's that, Homer?
I got a question. So as I've sat here and I've written down a lot of these, I'm also kind of looking at the other areas when they're all connected, and the other elements and the other themes. Some of these things are very much in quality of life. Some of these things will probably be in quality of life plus one other area too. So I just want to make sure as we're going through here with you and Logan, are you trying to going to highlight some of those things that we might want to carry to the other committees as well?
Absolutely. We know that these things, they're going to cross over. They're not pure silos. So we are going to cross-reference. But I think we're going to get through the first round of all the committees and let them see just what naturally comes up, as opposed to feeding them. Even though this committee might like to lead and feed the stuff to the other group, we don't want them reacting initially, but we'd love to see if, what comes out of the first round. Yeah. So I think we've gotten through.
Jane.
What's that?
I forgot me.
Jane.
No, we're saving her for last, as she requested, and so.
No, only save me for last for this first round, because I do want to hop in on this one little piece.
Okay, but so just so I'm clear, we've gotten all the committee members except for Jane right now. Is that's true? Okay, so Jane,
all right,
it's all yours.
It's my big idea. No, you know what? I'm really kind of glad that I waited, because hearing what people were saying about diversity and culture and, you know, programming and recreation. One of the things as I was looking at other big cities, what we're missing here is we're missing something that, you know, we've learned. I'm sorry, I'm going to close this window so you don't hear the, can you hear the, okay, good. You know, after the pandemic and after Bridge Street, we've learned that entertainment enlivens this city immensely. If people want to be out on the streets, they want to do all sorts of things. So what is it about that we can incorporate in a big idea that makes Dublin stand out like this? Like Austin, Texas is the city of music. Could Dublin be the city of music, culture, and playtime? So we could create a center like you've all talked about that incorporates an ability to have a concert, or maybe it's a dance hall, or maybe it's a place where we show diverse, you know, feeding off the Irish Festival. We do such a good job of bringing in music and all kinds of culture. Why can't we do that all the time in a place where we showcase Japanese music, we showcase Indian music, we have Indian dance, we have Japanese drummers. I mean, this is the place where we can say we are the city of music and culture, and build that idea so that we can incorporate all the things that you all just talked about as being so essential. Not only that, it would bring in tourism, it would bring in the ability for, I know when I was raising my kids and I'm watching my grandkids, they have no place to go. They have no place to go listen to music. They have no place to have any experiences. They either go out to dinner, or they go to the park and hang out, or they go see a movie. And in COVID, you couldn't even see the movie. Where we could have street entertainment and a center where, you know, people can gather and have that kind of fun. So for me, it's creating this unique indoor gathering space and then broadening that outside and become the city of music, culture, and playtime. So
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. So what I'd like to do is, you know, some of you gave one idea, but I got the sense that some of you had more, 80 more, I don't know what it is, but more. But instead of me going around, I'm just going to let you raise your hand or let me know if you want to share something. But I would like you, you know, as you're waiting to go your turn or you're just listening, you know, there is, you know, the graphic that Homer just showed you that had the elements associated with your theme. You don't have to have a big idea for every element, but you might look at those themes, you know, that are on there to see if that triggers an idea for an element that maybe has not been addressed. Again, I think you should use your elements as sort of touchstones for the work, but you don't have to have a big idea for, you know, all of them. So anybody else who has another big idea that they'd like to get out on the table? Yes, Kathy.
So I was listening on the news this morning. General Motors, I don't know if you heard this, announced that by 2040, they will no longer make combustion engine cars.
Right.
They're done. They declared it.
Yeah.
And I thought, yay, here we go, because we need to have some of that change. So I don't know if one of the big goals would to say by 2035, we want to have a city where at least half of the cars, we could support a city where half of the cars were electric. And really, whatever that infrastructure might look like, from a sustainability, we haven't talked about that. And I know that was one of our areas. And I thought there's such motivation to walk away from fossil fuels now. What could we do as a community to make it easy for somebody to buy electric cars here? And you're coming to one of Jane's big culture events, and no worries, we've got the ability for you to plug that car in or whatever. But really to think about sustainability in that way. The world's going there.
Yeah. No, and I'm pointing out the obvious to you that you sit in a corridor where, the automotive, a major automotive manufacturer and all of their supply, I mean, they're all right there on your doorstep. So it's more than just having somebody show up there. It's actually a more comprehensive economic quality of life sort of opportunity. Yeah, Jane, did I see your hand?
I wanted to tag on to Kathy because I think the big idea is staring us in the face with this Hyperloop possibility. And then Amtrak is talking about being able to have some high-speed transit. With us being connected to the 33 corridor and the smart transportation, I also think the city needs to leverage around being the smart transportation area. And one of the planning magazines, unbelievably, says by 2028, there's going to be these little, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like they're pods where you catch a little vertical airplane taxi and you take off and go somewhere in this little thing. It's not a helicopter and it's not an airplane, but they're these little pods, and the little vertical airplanes are garaged in them, and they look like these little spaceship discs. But the point of it is that on our west side, we have the possibility of a Hyperloop. We have Amtrak maybe being able to have a station. If we could do one of these little pods, if you can see what that looks like, and the fact that, if we have electric cars, or by that time, maybe we'll have autonomous instant taxis that you can call and go everywhere you wanted to. I do think transportation is something we really need to think about as being a big picture for us, because if we're going to attract even more corporate people, we need to have the ability to move them, and we also need to have the ability to entertain them and make their life really happy here. So those two things go hand in hand. And on the lifelong learning, Kathy, I totally agree with you there. I think we call that the smart campus. We can retool and reskill people whenever they want to be reskilled. We can have seniors learning lifelong. We can have students learning in a co-op way. I mean, I think lifelong learning is also the key. So I agree with that. I think the smart campus concept is really good.
Right. And Jane, your transportation idea sounds like it's related to Christina's as well, about just like this amazing, vast mobility choices. And if they're technologically oriented, it ties them together.
Jamie, I just wanted to mention, we have not heard from Lisa or Tammy yet. Before we finish on round, I don't know if either of you want to weigh in, or both of you, please.
I do. I've been trying to be quiet. It's killing me. So have we ever thought about a pedestrian, I'm making this up as I'm saying it, but a pedestrian only part of the city where you can't have vehicles? So we could have, little shops, maybe even a unique brick street, but no vehicles. So you don't have to worry about people parking and dropping things off. And I think that would be fun, relaxing, if you will. I have a couple other, but I'll let someone else go after.
All right, thanks, Amy. Yeah, Lisa.
I apologize. I just joined in. We just finished with court, so I'm not even really sure what's been said and what hasn't been. So I think I'll just listen, or if somebody can bring me up to speed as far as all the ideas that have already been thrown out, so I don't duplicate anything, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to do that, Lisa, but if it doesn't matter if we're duplicating right now. I mean, if there's something that's just really you want to share, we'd take it, and we will review here shortly about what we've got. But if there's something you want to share, please feel free to do it.
The only thing I can think of right off the top of my head, I think some type of civic center or gathering place to promote different cultures and things like that, I think would be so awesome for this community. That's one of them. And another one I hadn't, probably because I work with the Historical Society, would be some type of historical museum or something in the city that, even if it's small. I mean, I know that we've got the Kaufman House and kind of that campus but not really a museum, so to speak. So I think that would be awesome as well.
Does the museum have a focus, Lisa? Is it about the city or is it something else?
I think it would be about the city. I think it would be very cool to have it about the city's history.
Okay.
I have one other quick dovetail. For Jane's events and all of our transportation and Allison's big events, I would like for us to see us be a robustly multilingual city. You know, it seems that if we are a global city of choice, it seems to me that we ought to be like those global cities that you go to where you can look at a street sign and it's in 5 different languages. That speaks to the demographics of our community, the multi-generations of our community, and I would love to see more of a multicultural emphasis, or excuse me, multilingual emphasis on what we do, including sign language, by the way.
No, great. So is there anyone who, because we have another step here, is there anyone tonight who's got, feels really strongly about a big, potentially transformative idea that's not been put out on the table? Okay, got a couple. Okay, got 3. Okay, so Brandon, why don't you offer one here?
Sure. Mine kind of weaves in a lot of these, and it's around the things we've talked about with being connected and also about digital identity. And just the way that I think of this isn't necessarily identity for only proving that you're here, but it's the center point. So if you put the citizen into the center point of a circle, they consume services that we provide, but we would also like them to provide something in return. Excuse me. And I think that strikes to the heart of some of the different things we've talked about with the rec center programming, for instance, what's virtual and what's not virtual. And that talks about events and that talks about engaging people. And when I hear a place, I think of, this is going to be an awful reference, but it's a great movie, Demolition Man. Just watch it. You'll love it. They are so future oriented, and it's always still been my vision of the future since I was young, where I just see all these people coming together, coalescing, and there's the education component, there's the engagement component, where people are coming for services and leaving and taking services with them. But also there's just this way that, again, the citizen is the center and they're the focus. And I think that really gives us an opportunity to engage even more people than we do, because when we do activities now, sometimes the feedback we'll hear is for instance, we do our geo tours and we asked a few folks on Citizen U, would you guys sign up for this if you saw it on a flyer? And they're like, probably not, which was really good feedback. But it's, what's stopping you? Well, I'm a person. I live in a place. I like this city. It's great, but I'm not as invested as other people. And I think by figuring out ways, how do we get those people invested a little more? It makes everything stronger.
Okay, great. So before we go to Christina, Logan, we're going to put on the screen here in a minute some of the ideas, but Logan, if you could be thinking ahead and, those that, like multiple people have identified, if you could somehow highlight, what's there, I think that might help us. So if you could scan through there and do that, that'd be great. Christina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think one thing we haven't really talked about yet is housing. And, we've talked a lot about housing and how we are going to manage housing and different types of housing products and housing stock. So I think we need to figure out some type of a goal where we would want to add some amount of housing product that is affordable for household incomes under X number of dollars. I don't know that we want to go with things like definitions of quote unquote affordable housing. I think that there are some goals that are definitely reachable that are of several steps ahead of where we are today. But that could also include housing products that are shared housing, where you're bringing together an older person with a younger person for shared housing. It could include things like allowing people to build nanny flats on their property so that older folks can move into their nanny flats and they can rent their homes so they can stay in their homes longer. Like there's a whole bunch of different variety of ways to do that.
Right.
But that's definitely something that I think we really, really have to consider. If we're going to talk about things like civic centers and bringing folks together and places of learning, that we've got to be able to accommodate all the different demographics, both within our city today and demographics that we want in our city. And housing is one of the basic ways to do that.
Yeah. No, okay, so I think the way that you talked about that, bundling it, clearly could be transformative if you really tackle it in a ambitious way. And it must be connected to the statistic that Homer threw out earlier about only 11% of your workforce lives in the city.
It's partially connected to that. It's also connected to, the folks who want to stay in Dublin, who maybe are on the retirement end of the spectrum. And there's a lot of new people who are like, well, I just can't afford to live in Dublin. There's a lot. And it's really one of those things we have to take a very massive, comprehensive look at. Yeah. Because you cannot tackle it in little pieces and chunks.
Right.
Yeah, it's the number one piece of feedback from residents about aging in place. And we're stepping out into this space saying we want to be that city on a hill for someone to retire in. Can't do it without the diverse housing stock.
Right. That's great. Okay, Jane?
Right. Mine is, I call it a super greenway. Some of the other cities globally are looking at, and this kind of plays on what Tammy said about streetscape. I think if we look at the lessons that we learned in Dublin, when the interstate came and it created commerce, and then Muirfield came and it created the sports and the outdoors thing, Bridge Park and the entertainment. COVID is now about the streets and getting outside. That's what it taught us. So I would like to see a huge greenway that accommodates all kinds of transportation other than cars, that extends from Kaufman Park and also from Rings Road up Franz Road. I don't know how you get from Kaufman Park, but I'm sure there's a way over the, I think there's a way even under the bridge. I'm not sure how. That goes along the Indian Run Ravine, crosses the bridge, goes across to Bridge Park and all the way to Sawmill, so that you connect this in this huge greenway that protects some of our really beautiful scenic areas, but also connects one end of the city to the other. I also think that 15-minute city idea is going to have to be generated by bringing neighborhoods together and asking them what would they like to see happen in their neighborhood to create a 15-minute walk. And it might be a regulatory process that we do, that we say, well, listen, in a residential community, we will allow 2 commercial buildings. One could be a coffee house, one could be a gathering place that you play, I don't know, esports in, whatever it is. But what I think we need to ask our neighborhoods, what would you like to have happen to create a 15-minute community for you? So that, to me, that's the quality of life. Those who live in the core of Dublin have these things readily available to them, but those on the outskirts do not. And I think we have to plan for that. So I like the idea of these major greenways, more than just a bike path, things to happen along it that is protected and really inviting and lush.
Super. So, we're at 5:30 right now, and we wanted to do three things in this meeting, but you're the first one, so we have some options on how to do this. We wanted to do a little reflection on what you've shared right now and see if there were some ones that, came to the top. But I get the sense that for some of you, there's still more things coming out of your head about what you might do. So I want you to be comfortable that when the meeting ends at 6 o'clock, that you can still send us, over the next week. If you've got some other thoughts, we can kind of get them in the hopper. So don't feel like this is it. So in addition to trying to narrow it down a little bit, I also think we wanted to, try to get some initial thoughts from you on the items that seemed maybe more important to you. Again, we're not voting on them or anything tonight, but what are some things you'd want the staff to start thinking about? Like what are some things that we need to sort of get our arms around if we're going to be doing this? Again, not conclusive, but just to sort of prime the pump on that. And then the third thing was just, how did this go and how might we adjust future ones? So if that's okay with you, we'll go ahead on that path in the 30 minutes that we have. Okay. So we're gonna get a test to see here. 1, how good of a listener Logan was. 2, how well he types.
Oh gosh.
How well he highlighted our common areas. So Logan, are you in a position can you share?
Yes, I think so. So is everybody seeing that screen then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
If you can
So
expand the screen a little, can you? Or, yeah.
do you
Okay.
want me
So
to, so I can't show all of them at once because one of the things that I love about the conversation that's happened is we asked you to think of 5 to 7 and you've come up with 23 big ideas, which is fantastic. And I think the other thing is, the elements that we have. So engagement is one that's come up a ton in the conversation. And our starter list, that one didn't even have an idea that was necessarily tied to it. But there's a lot of these that you'll see. The ones highlighted specifically are ones that have been brought up from several different people. As you go through this, and obviously this is my rough rendition of what we've been talking about here. So we have all the opportunities to refine this, and this will be worked through based off of all of our comments. But there's a lot of things here that are really exciting to see and relate in many ways to one another. So I mean, feel free to take a look at this and to see if there are additional things that are standing out here, or if there's something specific that you need to know more about to help these ideas. So like what was discussed earlier of the 11% of the workforce is in Dublin. If there's more specific information that you all need to better understand the direction for some of these big ideas.
Yeah. I would point out that there are, because you just took the list down, there are some that are like redundant, that could be collapsed in terms of like cultural center and central venue. So that is something we could clean up for you. But I'd be clear, what are your, I know you're just seeing it back in front of you, but any initial reflections on just what you're looking at now?
I think some of these are super fun. I think you're right. I think we could collapse a few of them.
Yeah, I also think that I think there's a general theme here of social connection. It seems to be really around social connection, whether that's learning together, whether that's having fun together, whether that's learning about each other, culturally learning about each other, enjoying things. I think that's what, to me, is what's floating to the top, is a sense of social connection. And then also, we, I don't know that it's in here, but it's also digital connection. I think it's all about connectivity, even the pedestrian part where we talk about closing off the streets. And I think that's what we should be concentrating on, that we want to be a connected city. We just haven't expanded it as far as we'd like to. And that's what we're identifying here.
Yeah, I think it is about social connections, and then but then how do you facilitate getting to those social connections, whether that's through housing or multi-mode wackadoodle crazy awesome ways of transporting people through flying pods, or fractional ownership of whatever is going to be out there, right? Like, but to let your mind be your own limit, and because you can socially connect, but you can't really get to socially connect unless you can actually get there, or you can actually live in a place where you can get there, right? So I think it's all levels of that, Jane.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, as a path forward, and certainly open to others or reactions, but I'm wondering if the first step is to, one, give you a chance to sort of share anything else over the next week. Two, take your work and put it in a matrix with the other 3 themes. Get through the first meetings of the other 3 and see where the intersection is, because some of your ideas, like mobility, clearly have a quality of life aspect to them, but they might be like owned by the infrastructure group because that's where transportation really is. And so you could focus on some other things if you took that on. So then we could get through those and kind of sort out what other people were thinking. I mean, if the infrastructure group doesn't really pick up on, this really ambitious mobility ideas that a couple of you had, well, then maybe you run with it, right? Because you see it really as a critical quality of life aspect. But anyway, we don't know. But how does that sound in terms of giving you a little more time, organizing these by themes after all the other 3 groups get done, and then coming back to you with a report out on what really seems to be in your bucket, if you will.
Well, so Jamie, just to kind of dovetail onto what you're just talking about, here in the month of April, all 4 committees will have met.
Great.
And then in May, the May 17th workshop, we have, with all of the members of council, we have a Dublin 2035 update. So I was kind of scratching my head before you just made that suggestion that how we were going to do that. And if we've got the feedback from all 4, we've got this matrix, then you have council in that workshop, then that might be a good time to kind of sort through all of it, redefine things, going back out to the committees, and assign, work, divide and conquer that way. So just wanted to throw that out there. We do have that opportunity in May to do a Dublin 2035 update with all of council.
Okay. Yes, Kathy and Jane.
I want to caution us though. I think one of the challenges we had last time when we did these summarize things, we sort of lost the, I'm going to call it the grandiose nature of some of it. So I don't know, Logan, if there's a way to do a video compilation or an audio compilation. I mean, we can, where is Brandon? Okay, here's Brandon. Don't think you're going to get to hide from this, Brandon. There you are, Mr. Technology Man here. What was the name of that movie? Here you go.
Demolition Man.
So maybe you're going to be synthesized man. So I don't know if there's a way, because the thing about big ideas is you can't lose the bigness of the idea when you summarize it. So I'm just going to caution, because last time I think we did that a little bit, and I'm afraid that, in the act of trying to cull, you lose the. So I don't know how to do that, but I just want to put that big old leg up there and raise my hands again, because we did that last time.
That was a comment I was going to make, that right now it looks like we just want to build a civic center based on this exercise.
Yeah.
And to look at Lima, Ohio as the example.
Oh my gosh, that's not nice. That's not nice.
Hey, Jay doesn't mind.
So we have to be careful, and maybe part of that is how do you create a big idea out of these pieces? So instead of synthesizing it, you're doing something different with it. So maybe we resist the urge to do that for a while and let the big ideas become bigger, not synthesizer. Anyway.
So Kathy, before you said that, I wasn't thinking about the video, but that clearly could be an option. But what I was thinking is, we don't want to pass just the headline around, because it did just what you said. What I thought, we should do with the staff team should actually, put this together where there's the headline, but also, 3 to 5 bullets that try to capture some of the flavor that you put around it, and not to disassociate the description from the title at this point, because you don't get it if we don't add that to it. So
I would be real careful not to bulletize things. Again, I would go the other direction, right? Write a story around it even. I don't know. The thing about big ideas is they blossom, right?
Yeah.
So this is
well, maybe I wasn't clear, or maybe I wasn't, and we disagree, and that's fine too. But I was thinking that every one of the ideas, has to have a headline. You have to be able to talk about it in a way that doesn't take 3 minutes to explain it, right? There's got to be like the name of the idea, but then there's got to be an elaboration. And what I was suggesting, instead of writing the story in a prose, that you write it in a series of bullets, so that other people can more easily decipher what it's about. But we're open to doing it way. I think we have the same objective. We don't want to just boil it down to where you don't get the meaning of it, but we also want people to be able to grasp it, like your other committee members in the group.
So I think back when I was a kid, and one of the ways that we would work on things like big ideas and brainstorming when you're trying to put something together is, this is maybe going to sound very childish, I apologize, but is a collage. Right. And so you're not sticking small words to something that's big. You're seeking out inspirational images, and maybe some inspirational words too, right? It could be all of those things, so that you come up with this sort of idea bubble that's bursting with color and flavor. And and maybe that I'm being stupid. If I am, just tell me to shut up. But that
No.
was the thought that I had, so you don't lose that
Yeah.
excitement of it.
Yeah. So I can tell you right now, Christina, we don't have the excitement for all of these ideas right now. So maybe what I hear you saying is that we need to build on these, right? Need to explain them with some imagery. I know Jane, after the last time we talked, sent a video of something, right? You could see it. So it feels like, you know, maybe the charge from the committee to the staff is to find some way to summarize and convey the excitement of these in a way that can be shared, that can be visual, right? So other people can get it. And it doesn't get boiled down to where it doesn't mean anything. And there are some of these that we probably are going to need some help from you. I mean, and this is not being critical of any particular idea. We were brainstorming. Some of these lend themselves really well to visuals and getting really excited. Some of them, like, they don't yet, and we need to work on that.
I really like the idea that Christina had on the visuals because, and also on building. I agree with Kathy. When we distill it, we lose the imagination of it. And as I listen to everybody, and that's what's so hard about Zoom, and there's so many of us, you know, I want to add to Kathy's idea, and I want to add to Christina's idea, and I want to add to Tammy's idea. And this gives us the opportunity to then send in additions to and build on the ideas that already been presented. And I think that's what makes the idea even bigger and richer. So absolutely, I think visuals, sending in either videos or even having a little video compilation of some of the conversations here would help others to understand what's been said, a simple way for others to get the idea too of what we've talked about.
Okay. So it sounds like we're bleeding in a little bit about what we're learning from tonight's exercise, right? I mean, you know, one of the things that I think that I've learned is that we should encourage, you know, even coming into the meeting, like when we like announce this meeting, for people to think visually, right? Like, come with your ideas, and if you want to share something, even holding it up, you know, on the screen, you know, help us to, you know, help communicate visually that way. I think we've learned that. I also think that, you know, we really wanted to get to a point tonight where we could, you know, talk about like what it is that we need to be thinking about so we could make the case for some of these ideas. But I think what I've learned is we still need to build the ideas before we talk about justification of anything. So I would sort of take that out of the agenda going forward. But anyway, those are a couple of things just right off the top that I think I've learned from our experience here. We'd like to hear anything you might have to share with us about how this has gone or how it's not gone.
Thank you that everybody participated. Because it's a pretty boring conversation without the richness of all the fabric of, and so I just think that was really fabulous. So I so appreciate that.
Yeah, no, good. I think I would echo from somebody who tries to facilitate meetings and brainstorming that this is not the ideal experience that we're having, but you all have really done well here. And I think if we can be more intentional about getting some visuals into the meetings, that might help us all. Any other thoughts about how, you know, the meeting tonight, we could do better there's a group meeting on Thursday?
I don't know what you could do better, but one of the things that I will say is I absolutely loved hearing from the staff and everybody about the ideas, because to me, that is where the experience is, what this city needs. You all know it. I don't think as a council member, we can pretend to know it. We haven't been around long enough to really understand it, but knowing what Matt deals with and the ideas for the esports, I think that's fabulous, a venue for that. And Allison, knowing how the festivals, you know, these big ideas of a festival was a big idea, and look what it did for the community. It came from staff, and I just encourage you to continue to just throw your ideas out there, because that's where the foundation of all these good ideas are going to come from. It's not going to come from council, I don't think.
Right. Well, I don't know this is true, but I'm going to speak on staff anyway. I mean, I think it's really important that they know that that you want to hear from them, right? I mean, I think that's really important. Also, like I didn't mean to overlook Tammy. She's a really critical part of the team, but I wasn't sure whether the engagement was really about the committee and the staff on the committee or just anybody who was on the call.
Brainstorming is just that, right? Somebody sparks something and it goes. So I don't know. We'll see how the other groups want to do it, but I think it's what made it work, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the quietest person who has the most brilliant idea.
Yeah. So fair warning, in terms of staff support and how we have them aligned with each one of the thematic areas, quality of life actually had the most staff lined up to support it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we had, HR, police, because all of these directors have some stake in quality of life at some point. So Dana and I just kind of threw these together. The one on Thursday, you're going to have probably half the staff. Matter of fact, less than half the staff that's going to be participating about how we have it lined up. So right now we've got the director of engineering. Matt Ehrman will be involved with it again. The asset management and support services, that's Bob Taylor. He'll be around, and then the transportation and mobility. We don't have that director identified yet. So all of you, if you think you have some additional stake in infrastructure, which is the theme for Thursday, by all means, you can throw your hat in the ring and join in. Now, Jay Anderson, you're part of the public service committee. You're usually there with those meetings anyway. So if you're routinely in support of the public service committee, you should still be showing up, for that meeting anyway and participate in it. But so you're going to have a lower representation of staff on Thursday than you have tonight. So I'm not sure.
And it dwindles down.
Data will be part of that one as well. So
yeah, and it dwindles down to next to nothing by the time you get to finance committee.
Yeah.
And Homer,
maybe we Homer see if we can make some additional invites, if that's one of the lessons learned tonight. I don't know, that's certainly up to staff, because I know staff's agendas are full, but I think the richness of the conversation is far superior. So
yeah, and a note I sent the staff earlier today. I mean, in these various areas, I mean, land use, the economic one, infrastructure. After we get these big ideas, one of the things that we're going to have to do as staff is we're also going to have to look. Once we get this visionary, framework pulled together, then we're going to have to start looking at what are the critical success factors and what are the barriers, and then what are the linking statements, from this framework to the community plan and the other various plans that we have as well. So that's all work down the road. But it really behooves all of us that if you have any kind of a stake or an interest in these areas, that if you want to involve yourself, I highly encourage you to do so, because it may impact your operations for the next several years, so.
And can you also maybe send, and I don't know if this is, Jay, whether you think, send out a notice to the committees, to think about bringing aspirational images with them when, to be prepared. Since we learned that this time, it makes it so much easier if we have something to show, and it makes it easier for everybody to understand what your big idea might look like.
Yep.
Great. I was curious about the packet that Jenny sent out in advance of this meeting, and how you felt that helped you prepare tonight, or helped you during the meeting, or didn't help you.
My overall thought is, we have a tendency to put everything in one big PDF, and it was X amount of pages. I might pull just the worksheet out of it, the workbook sections out of it, where here's the section of here's the 5 things we're going to do, and because it gets lost in the pieces, I think, and it weren't quite sure what to do. Jane and I had a chat about it today, roughly, and I just think maybe thinking about what's the bare minimum we need to convey what we're trying to do, because then we have time to read it actually and use it. Otherwise it gets lost, and I think I've got to navigate this whole thing, and that would be my advice.
Okay, simplify. Sounds like, yeah, I imagine all of you get plenty of email that this is just, if we can simplify it and make it lean, that probably helps you a good bit.
Yeah, and I also mentioned to Jenny Delgado that if, for at least for council members, for each of these meetings, when you simplify it, what we need to do just to throw that into board pack with the agenda, because it makes it so much easier to find it all in one spot.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from you about the notebook or tonight? I think we got a path forward. I think that the staff can, send you a note, but we'll give you another 7 days to put some ideas together. We're gonna try to clean the list up, but also put some detail on it, and that'll go back out to you at some point to make sure that the story's being told, whether it's bullets or prose, and if you've got some imagery to associate with it. And then we'll go ahead and conduct this with the other 3, and then find out where the intersections of ideas are to help shape your work going forward. So, well, thank you very much. This was fun. There are definitely some big transformative ideas in here. We need to give some more definition to some of them, but some really good stuff. So, Jenny, is it back to you? Or back to the Vice Mayor?
Homer had his hands up, right?
Yeah, I just want to make one other comment about staff, and Kathy, this will probably make you happy. Brandon is actually, I've tagged him to be in all of these committee meetings, so he'll be around, so. Same thing with the director of IT as well, because a lot of this stuff with those particular directors, it's gonna go across all of them. So just so you know that.
Thank you.
I missed one bad movie reference per meeting.
Yeah. Good. And Lisa, I know you missed it all. Maybe, I don't know if you want to come to another one and share some, because I know you missed part of the meeting and would love to hear some of your thoughts too as well. So thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. I could do that. That'd
be wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. I think although it's very difficult, I think this was a good first step. So I so appreciate it. Other thoughts or comments before we conclude this evening?
Yeah, Kathy, I was going to say, if you could maybe send a note out to the members of council to encourage them to view the video of tonight's meeting, I think that might be very helpful to them, and it might help stir some ideas in their minds too about other areas.
Yeah, and maybe we'll divvy it up and make a couple phone calls, because that's easier too than even emails, and just have a chat. I don't know, maybe Christine and Jane, we could make a couple phone calls and just putting some flavor around it. That might be.
I will definitely reach out to Finance Committee. I think that is going to be one of the more challenging ones for us. Cool.
Will do. And I sent Brendan a private note while we were chatting here, and I told him I'm looking for a full-length movie of this particular chat before next time. Yeah. And yeah, it's gonna make the at least the con festival. I don't know if it's gonna make academies, but you start something.
Nobody wants to see that, Kathy.
Oh, you haven't seen Brandon's magic here yet, so we'll see what he can do. Anyway. Jamie, Logan, thank you very much. We appreciate all your help with us today. So
you're welcome.
Anything else before we go enjoy the beautiful evening? Thank you all.
All right. Good night.
Yeah.